10th, public safety meeting, 8 o'clock. Spring is in the air. That's right, get your Claritin out, and remember, you're outside, you're walking around, you've got your stroller, you got your bike. We please cross in the crosswalk. Please look twice, look 3 times before you cross. And if you're in a car, slow down, stop at stop signs. Look, count to 4 when you're at the stop signs to look for kids, look for bikes, look for strollers. It's really important, now that the good weather's here, that we actually pay attention to one another in a very clear way. Thank you. We have the agenda, and John, would you like to go ahead and talk about the document you sent us?
Yes, good morning, everybody. I just wanted to give everybody an update on status of command. It hasn't changed much since last month. Everything pretty much stays the same with personnel. With fleet, the only change to fleet is we now have 3 operable mobile video recorders in the cars. 97 has been updated and outfitted with that, and had some updates to their lighting bars in the back to control traffic. In addition to that, our LPR was installed on last Monday and Tuesday. However, it has not been used. It is not in place until we have a policy ironed down before we put it active. I already notified the mayor about the policy being in construction. In addition to that, we do have some additional training information. In addition to the rifle recertification, rapid response, which is active shooter, emergency vehicle operations and tactics, we've been offered an opportunity by the Department of State for dignitary and executive protection, which will come this summer at no cost to the borough. It's being offered free of charge. The good news is the agent who actually works for the Department of State is a resident right here in Norbert and has offered our department the training first. In addition to that, the Philadelphia Police Department has offered training to our officers for TACMAC, which is simulation training and fast training up at the Philadelphia Police Academy for rapid deployment and rapid response. The Delaware Valley Intelligence Center is also offering an engagement to learn what a fusion center is to anybody who's interested in the borough, to come down and see how information is captured in real time and is actually coordinated and given out. There's 79 fusion centers throughout the entire nation. There's 3 located right here in Pennsylvania. The primary one is the Delaware Valley Intelligence Center, and we just got this offered to us on Friday, this past Friday. So I'm constantly looking for opportunities and options and alternatives for training for our officers, for professional development. As you know, one of the biggest challenges that we have is coordinating scheduling to get those officers there, because we basically have 1 officer on duty per shift. So those challenges are obvious. However, I'm very pleased that this training, not only the training that the officers are required to get every year through MPO, through certifications by the state to make sure that we're an Act 120 police department, but we're now getting them training that they're interested in, that's going to help professional development and further their own careers and actually benefit the borough at the same time. So I'm very pleased that this has happened. The other good news is that we're on target with our MPO certifications for the year. The officers, pretty much all of them, are done first aid, CPR, and AED. Those are a 2-year certification. We mentioned this last month, and right now, that it was not on there last month, legal updates and firearm training required by the state is currently in progress and scheduled. So everything is going well in terms of training, and we're moving forward. So now 4 MVRs are fully functional. As we move down to equipment, our 3 MDTs are fully functional. The one thing that we're working on right now that we want to make sure happens sooner than later is that we have in-vehicle reporting, that we start to standardize ourselves and have in-vehicle reporting so we can eliminate steps. Other than that, there is no other update other than one under equipment. Our non-lethal weapons are in good working condition. However, our tasers, we have 2 to the department. They need to be replaced probably sooner than later. And that's it. That's my presentation for status of command.
Thank you. Thanks, John. I think the next item we have there is the conversation about directives and policies. So we did ask at last month's meeting to come up with some kind of a timeline. Maybe what we have previously, and instead of taking them as they come, having some, in the news, shall we say, having clear policies and understanding of how they work. Not just for the department, but for the public and for those who have questions would be able to see this document and understand completely, because it is under right to know, that we'd be able to provide that and say, here's some information regarding your rights and back to the public.
Right, okay, well, thank you, I appreciate the opportunity.
Sure.
This right here is our combination of general orders and directives for the police department in North Borough. Some of these things inside are completely outdated, some are dated 2002, some are dated 2006. We are currently in progress to replace these directives. Now, many of these general orders and many of these directives, there's redundancy.
Yes.
They have to be consolidated, because ultimately the goal is to get the department accredited by the Pennsylvania Chiefs Association, which the borough is a member of. That is the gold standard to get that accreditation for your department. However, in order to do that, we have to take general orders and directives, make sure, number one, that they're updated. In addition to that, to make sure that they're consolidated. You cannot have redundancy in instruction and policy. So it's got to be clear, because there can be no gray areas and miscommunication when it comes to, God forbid, if you're ever sued. So you can't have two different documents out there floating. In addition to that, these directives, obviously, I can't open it up and talk about things verbatim, because some of it is law enforcement sensitive.
Understood.
But however, the one thing that's important to know is that as we start to go through these directives, there are many directives, many general orders in here that are just simply no longer relevant to the police department, to the operation of our officers.
Right.
Because they're just simply outdated. Now, here is a binder where I have actually started reconstructing the directives and consolidating general orders and directives. So we currently have 5 under construction. They have been disseminated. We have 2 more under construction. One I just mentioned to the mayor yesterday that we could talk about offline, which I feel is very important. But as we start to work through this, this is what we have to do. I always try to look for what we can do instead of what we can't do. I try to think positive. However, what we need, these are bigger picture items. What we need is, it simply needs time. Like, for instance, as we start to go through these things verbatim and start to pick out the language that we need that's going to be current and conducive to our organization, the one thing that's important to note is we could go get a set of directives or general orders from the Pennsylvania Chiefs Association, which is a blanket boilerplate, put our names on the top of it, but many of those directives would simply not be relevant to our operation. So it doesn't make that much sense. It's not rational. So you have to actually piece through this stuff. This is no doubt one of the biggest projects that we have to move our department forward as we look to what the 2-year goals are, the 3-year goals, 5-year goals. This is a priority. In order to do this, you need time. All right, so, and what I have to do is I have to go find time to do that. As of right now, losing Officer Kelly Lynn from limited duty has put me behind the 8 ball with this. However, I am still working on this to get this done. My timeline, to be quite frank, I'm hoping that this off season during the summer, that there's going to be a lot of time afforded to me where I can make a lot of revisions and a lot of changes and get a good solid base for updated directives and policies for our department that we can actually share and be proud of, and we can move the department forward for professional development in terms of what our clear-cut policies are and how we can hold the officers accountable for performance within this scene. So that's basically my update. However, the one thing to take into consideration, these general orders, some of them are, I'm glad that we have them. Let me put that out first. I'm very glad that we have them, regardless of when they were dated. And just to actually let people know my idea in terms of my experience, as you start to go through your directives, the one thing that's important to note is you can't just sit there and put a new directive together, even though it's the same, and say, here's the date issued, without mentioning the date that it was originally issued, because then you're basically saying for all this time your borough never had that directive, when in fact that's simply not true.
Right.
You had that directive. So what I do on my directives, as you can see, I put not only the original issue date, but the date that it was revised. So you always have that in there to show, yes, we can refer back to an original document where this directive has been in place for X amount of time. We just made sure that it was concurrent and contemporary, and we updated and revised it. So I think those are important things to note, that we just can't rewrite the directive and say it never existed before, because God forbid something should happen and people are going to hold us accountable and say, I can't believe that you had a department for this long that didn't have this policy for this reason. So that's simply not the case. And I give credit to whoever my predecessors were in terms of leadership, officer in charge, because there is some good comprehensive material that was put together here that the officers to this day still follow. So if anybody has any questions about this, I'd be glad to answer them.
Rob, any questions?
Okay, so summer timeline to kind of clean up the policy
Yes.
manual.
Is that August? Is that what you're asking? Is that
Yeah,
August,
like,
July?
I mean,
What are we?
It does
I'm hoping-
seem like a lot of work.
Yeah.
Believe me,
Yeah.
it's a lot of work. And in a perfect world, I'm thinking, yes, I would like to have this done by, let's say, even the end of September, to have this done after the council season comes back into full swing. And that's my goal, that's my objective. And I would like to, as we continue, to give updates to the Public Safety Committee on where we're going and what we're doing with it. And also, too, to come up with a list of directives that are in this book inside here that simply are no longer relevant, that we don't need them. Because my goal is ultimately, this is just too thick. This is just too outdated.
Got it.
There's consolidation that can happen, and we have to
Thank
move
you.
forward with that.
Thank
So
you.
I'm hoping, Rob, with that in mind, yes, that this summer will be a good progress mode for us in terms of directive and policy development that's actually going to help us get where we need to go.
Great.
Robin, any questions? No. Fran?
No.
Cindy?
Yeah, thank you.
Sean? Matt? Mayor?
No, I'm working with the chief we're working together to try and get it organized. The way we like it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, we appreciate the work. We understand exactly everything you've pointed out, John. That we're aware that it needs to be done, and that clearly updates are really important. And I've always said, reviewing materials, ordinances, they have to come through. We have to review them and update them, just on our side, just like on your side. And that's reality. Next up, Fran. We're going to move ahead to the Norbert Fire Department. Cost of service calls. Fran, you have anything for us?
Yeah, I have my report, but on the cost of service, we took last couple of years of information, operating expenses, and divided them by our responses, and we came up with between $250 and $270 a call.
One second.
That's great.
That's great.
And it's difficult to break down
Yeah,
individual calls.
sure.
We had 3 calls over the weekend. 2, and of course they were all in the middle of the night, it seems like. The first one was odor of burning in the home. We investigated. It turned out to be the motor on a water cooling apparatus. But we used our thermal imaging camera, which helps us locate heat sources. That's $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 piece of equipment. The second call at 4 in the morning was a CO alarm going off in an apartment building. We checked all the floors of the apartment. We checked the apartment that was supposed to be affected with our CO meters, which are also expensive little gadgets. And we also have a contract with a company that comes out and calibrates our meters every month, because CO is obviously fatal in the right doses, and we want to make sure that we're giving accurate information to homeowners or business owners, building occupants, so that when we say your detector is wrong, our detectors are right. You don't have to worry about it. You can get your kids out of the car and put them back in bed, because no, there isn't CO in your house, because those detectors just go bad after a while.
Yeah.
And I would actually note that when you throw them away, please take the batteries out, because Officer Vernaccio and I spent about 20 minutes investigating an audible fire alarm at 4 in the morning when we went on the CO call, and someone had thrown their smoke detector out and it was in their trash can. So please silence your alarms. Hit them with a hammer, take the battery out, do something, so that we don't have that, because that's not the first time we've had that kind of call.
Right.
And then the third call, we were returned before we got to Windsor Avenue, because the alarm was set off by steam from the shower. So that cost whatever it costs to start the truck and drive around the corner. So, there's a lot of equipment that come on the apparatus. As we know, we just bought a brand new piece of apparatus for $500,000, and then it's an expensive proposition to put the equipment on there so that we can give the people who are calling us the peace of mind that when we leave, whatever your problem was, we hope we have solved it. we don't like to leave undiscovered mysteries when we've been dispatched, especially not that we take more care one way or the other, but especially in a home where people are living and they got their family. And we're in the process now with a grant that we went in with Lower Merion Fire Department to purchase all new breathing apparatus for the firefighters, which is another expensive, but obviously life-saving, not just for the firefighters, but for the people that we are protecting. And because of the grant and because of our cooperation with Lower Merion and their cooperation with us, it's costing us about 1/3 to buy.
Did you hear that, Andy Gavin? Thank you.
To buy the self-contained breathing apparatus that we need. The bottles have to be replaced every 15 years because the Department of Transportation doesn't allow you to transport cylinders that are over 15 years old. So it doesn't matter whether the bottles are in good shape or not. If they're 15 years old, they got to go and you got to get new ones. And with the advances in equipment, 15 years is probably, as Chief Gallagher would tell you, there's been significant updates in everything. So you should be looking, all the new air packs, each individual air pack will actually have a thermal imaging camera on it.
Wow.
So that the firefighters,
Yeah.
because that allows you to look through smoke and see sources of heat like a body.
Right.
So that's a pretty important piece of equipment for us to have. So that's what it came down to, looking. Our expenses have been up last year and this year because of the new apparatus, obviously. So I looked back a couple of years just to get an average. But between $250 and $270 is as reasonable a average as we can come up with.
Thank you very much, Fran.
You're
Give me
welcome.
1 second.
Oh, we will be this year, yeah.
Just wanted to be clear. Thanks.
May I ask for any questions?
Sure, so
about
Mr.
this?
Metric has a question.
Yeah,
We'll go
I
around
really,
everybody.
I think this is really important, valuable information, and if it's a conversation we should have outside the meeting and follow up on, we can do that, but I'm curious about your methods to calculate that number per call, because the way I think about costs and budgeting is that there's operating dollars we spend every year on things that get used up, and then there's dollars we spend on capital items that don't get used up year over year. They're items that last longer than a year, like the bottles that last 15 years. And if you paid $15,000 for one of those bottles, you have to depreciate that over time.
Yeah,
You can
sure.
kind of say that bottle's costing you about $1,000 a year, because when 15 years comes, you're going to have to buy another one. Just like this meeting has a cost baked into it, because we paid for the roof, the electricity, the chair that Rob is sitting in, and for the hour that we're here, there's some cost baked in there. So I'm curious to look, if you'll allow me, or you think it's worth time to kind of dig a little deeper and see if you've baked in those capital costs in there, because I know with the fire company, you're probably looking at a very capital heavy operation,
Yeah,
because
sure.
you've got $2 million of rolling apparatus just in the garage, not to mention all the other stuff that the firefighters need to do their jobs. And then you have the operating costs, which are probably really low, because you'd have personnel showing up, volunteering their time, whereas the borough, our biggest expense is salaries. So
Well, there's no question.
it's a unique operation. I'd like to look at it if you...
There's no question that if you had to start factoring in personnel,
Right.
and
Right.
you know, when we go to any call, we probably have close to 100 years of the firefighting experience on the apparatus when it shows up. So if you had to start factoring that kind of thing in, I mean, there's no question that the volunteer fire service, which is unfortunately in decline all over this country, but it saves taxpayers not millions, but billions of dollars nationwide every year, and has been since Ben Franklin's days. So when if you start factoring that in, then the expense of maintaining a volunteer fire department is tremendously reduced.
Thank you, Fran. Thank everybody in the department, really, volunteers. If you're thinking about volunteering, you should be volunteering.
Absolutely.
You should absolutely see the fire chief and find out more information.
Happy
One of
to
the
train
conversations I had with Chief Gallagher, Fran, and I think you should be part of this too, is we should have some kind of an open house and some kind of information back out to the community where they can come in and have a conversation about volunteering, or look at the police department, or look at the changes that have happened in the fire department. I think it's really important.
Well, we have
And, kids love it, so that's part of it too.
We have an open house every year.
Right.
For fire prevention. But there's nothing preventing anybody from coming down. There's always the gentleman on duty who is a firefighter, or lady, as it is, who is a firefighter, and you're welcome to come down, talk to them. They will show you around the apparatus. They will give you a tour. They will give you an application if you're interested in volunteering, and we certainly encourage it.
Great.
And as far as calls, I just want to bring up one call that we had this month. On March 18th, we responded to Bed Bath & Beyond. An elderly gentleman had become trapped on the cart escalator.
Yeah. I was there that day. I saw you guys.
Unusual call. I think he got confused, or he may have had balance issues where he was afraid to let go of his cart.
Yeah.
But he started to ride the cart escalator down with the cart, and his feet got caught in the apparatus that takes the cart down. And we got assists from the two Lower Merion Township rescue companies and everybody working together. We were able to free him without any significant injury, thank God, because the tracks that it runs on are rubberized. Because escalator accidents can be, I'm sure the chief has seen them in the city, can be horrendous. So, it's not all fires, and it's not all checking out alarms, because you never know what's going to happen. And we just had a drill last night with 15 or 20 people who were here for about 3 hours. We train 3 times a month to be ready so that when we're called, we can come out and do our very best.
Thanks, Fran. I appreciate that. Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Fran?
I do. Fran, can you just tell the members of the public and anyone who's watching how often folks should be changing their carbon dioxide detectors and their fire detectors?
A good shorthand is when you change the clocks, change the batteries.
Okay, but you said they wear out after time.
Oh yeah, after time. Right now, and these are probably significantly more expensive than the $10 or $12 ones that you used to be able to get at Rickland's. You can go to a hardware store or something and get a sealed unit that has a 10-year battery. Okay. Now, whether they last 10 years, I'm not going to go out on a limb but it's very important, especially CO, but smoke tow. And people get complacent because you cook dinner and it sets off your smoke detector, so you take the battery out and then you don't put it back in. And it's very, there's no question that smoke detectors save lives. Every time you hear of a serious fire or fire with a fatality, almost every time they'll go out to whoever the incident commander was, and they will say that we discovered no smoke detectors in the home. So,
and say for those, like in my house, I have a number of fire smoke detectors that are hardwired into the house. Those also need to be changed that often, or often?
Well, another important thing to remember is they all have a battery. People think because they plug it in that, okay, that's fine. Well, when the battery wears down, because the battery's there for a backup in case you lose electricity, when the battery dies, it'll start to beep just like a low battery one that is not hardwired. And then we end up getting called and we come out, and that's often at 4 a.m. because people are freaked out because it's plugged in and they don't realize, well, I shouldn't have any problems with this. I have electricity. If it's going off, there must be something going on. Well, there is a battery in that, and that should be replaced. I mean, at a minimum once a year for batteries. For smoke detectors, and if you don't have the sealed ones with 10-year batteries, and like I said, I'm not schooled enough in the making of smoke detectors to vouch for them, but I would say every 5 years throw them out, get a new one. Because it's certainly they're not that expensive, and it's a pretty worthwhile investment when you play it against the opposite.
Okay,
Exactly.
great, thank you.
Exactly. And it's well worth the investment in your home, in your life, in your
Absolutely.
property.
Oh, sure.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, especially
And the insurance company will thank you as well.
especially CO.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to overlook smoke, but CO is the product of incomplete combustion. If you're having an issue with your heater, your hot water heater, anything like that, there's no smell. People are, oh, I didn't smell anything. Well, there is no smell. Some CO is odorless, tasteless. You're not going to know. The symptoms are flu, basically, and reddening of the lips and the extremities. If you have pets who seem odd, they seem lethargic.
Wow.
You know, we've just seen it too many times, and we've had serious CO calls, including in the borough, up on Norbert Avenue. We have readings close to 1,000, which is lethal within 10, 15 minutes if you stay in that atmosphere. So if you don't have a detector, and they were actually the people who are having the problem were notified because it was seeping through the walls, and the neighbors,
Oh, boy.
the detector in the neighbor's apartment went off, and we were able to get them out. But that was a number of years ago. But that stuff can be fatal, and compared to the price of a detector, it's a pretty
Yes.
it's a
Makes
pretty
more sense than
cost-worthy
the detector.
investment.
Absolutely. Thank you
Get
so
the
much.
detector.
Not
Thank
at
you,
all.
Fran.
Not
There's
at
one
all.
piece I wanted to add here, and I know we had a resolution at our last public meeting of full council with a definition of terms for a fire marshal and therefore leading to inspection. So I think maybe at next month's meeting, we should have a conversation about fire inspections, that list going forward to the folks who are going to perform the fire inspections. So if you'll invite Kevin to the meeting next month, so we can have that conversation about inspections and what's all involved, so that council members and the public are aware, as well as property owners. And that moves us on to the information items, which is number 2. It's parking management. It's the recommendations from the parking studies. And I'm sorry that I did send that late. We were trying to hammer together some amount of information and Matt was good enough to give us pull up some data for us. So I just want to start by saying, for guest parking or guest passes in the borough, there was never any legislation that allowed guest parking or passes in the borough ever, whenever we implemented any kind of a parking system. That Robin knows. There was no legislation. There was no way to sort of monitor it or keep track of it. And I think to some extent there was no desire. So, except maybe on Robin's part, and to kind of figure out. And then we moved to 72 2-hour zones in a town that's a half-mile square. So it sort of defeated the purpose of the 2-hour zone by having 72 of them. Yes, we understand that.
72.
2-hour zones on the books.
72.
It was on the books as 72. I was here when we presented that
I don't
information
think
to
we
the
have
parking
72
people.
streets in the borough.
It's just, well, that was just it. So there was overlay. It was this. It was, I mean, it was from the whole picture.
Okay.
Not recently, but
That's not an accurate number.
no, there was like a moment where it was just like, why are they all crossing over each other? What's canceling what? We couldn't make heads or tails of it. So it was just sort of messy. So a few years ago, when I was, who was it? Mr. Wakebright, Mr. Weisboyd, and myself were on Public Works. We decided to suspend granting any more 2-hour zones till we went through the process of the parking study. So that's why no new ones have been added. And even requests that have come forward, we've had to say, sorry, we're working on this other piece of the parking study and trying to get that completed and then take action on it by council. I'm going to start by saying that if you have bought a property in the borough of Norbert that came with a deed that said you have a driveway, but now you have lawn, My advice to you is put your driveway back. And if you have a driveway and you're not using it, I suggest to you that you start using your driveway, myself included, to get your car off the street, because these changes are going to come from parking, and it's better to get into the habit now of using your driveway and allowing guests or people who do business in the borough, plumbers, your neighbors need tree work, they have to park on the street. So best to get into the habit of using your driveway sooner rather than later. Matt was kind enough to go through, I'm sorry, I have other papers here, go through the last year and request for guest permits. And on average, what he's been able to pull out of the information of last year, and I'll send it around, is that it's on average about 10 requests per month, and it happens generally in, what did we say, 7 streets? The same 7 streets? Close to. And of course, as you know by the parking study, they've divided the town into 3 zones. So some of it is crossover. You'll see how the information goes. This isn't a staggering task that is before us, but we do know that the public and people who live here clearly want to be able to have their services, should it be home health aides or their caregivers to their children or their loved ones, be able to have them park in the borough and not receive a ticket, and to have some understanding of what guest passes looks like around the world, and then therefore what we can implement for the recommendations here. Where am I? So what we have determined from the study is, and I keep pointing to Sean's because he has his here, is that passes have to be validated per address. That probably makes sense, right? To say that if you have a guest pass, Andrea's going to call and say, hey, I have somebody who's visiting here with me, or a service is coming to my door in my house for the next 3 weeks. So maybe the information we need to collect from her is like, this is the address, this is the tag, this is the make and model, this is the information that's going to be there, and they can park within 2 blocks of her. I'm just suggesting of her residence. I'm just saying that seems to make sense. Because if you're on North Essex and you need to get to 300 North Essex, you know that you're going to park at the 200 block of North Essex because you can't really park. Okay, so there's limited parking on 300. So some of those ideas were pointed out here. What part of the conversation I've had with many people over the course of the time that we've had this document is that it's not overwhelming, especially with the new system, to track this. What we're really talking about is a price structure. And Robin, you know what the ticket prices are, right? So if we give somebody a ticket for parking too close to the corner, or we give somebody a ticket for over meter, what those costs are. And I've asked Sean to kind of, if he could, I don't know if you have it, it's really about the price structure and what that looks like. Lots of other communities charge by day, and that's just business day. Some prorated, so if you had somebody coming visiting for 3 or 4 months, then that might be a different kind of a long-term guest pass, and that would be something that would be in the system, and it would be a dollar amount. Again, it's just what's out there in the world. I'm not making a suggestion. Because we haven't determined what a full year pass would look like. We haven't made those determinations. So it comes down to the 3 zones that are presented in the study, as well as a price point and effectively have folks come in and register those guest vehicles and then pay the fee for the time that those vehicles will be in the borough, and we'll have all the information available. But one piece the other communities sort of have that we don't is they have somebody on site at 7 o'clock, at 4 o'clock, at 5 o'clock to be here in the evening to issue those. So let's say Andrea's home health aide is going to be late by 2 hours, and this borough office is going to be closed. How does she get that pass? And so what we're looking for, John, if a conversation on your side, and Andrea certainly on your side, is could officers then be able to issue those passes? Could they have shared information to be able to issue those passes? Just consideration. And again, if it's only 10 a month, we're not looking at an extraordinary amount of passes. Just something to consider. That's all I'm asking, is would it be possible?
I don't know, John,
I don't think you have to answer in this moment. I think you have to consider it and what's happening and what times.
My only concern would be to put one more thing on the officers, to put one more thing on me. It just seems to be, it's another project that we would have to manage. It's another concern for us. It's another time-bearing issue that takes away from a lot of our mission. It's, as you can imagine, recently with the change to the United Public Safety System, which went effective on March the 6th, which I believe was a Wednesday or Tuesday. Since that time, Robin and I basically have been dealing with a lot of this stuff regarding parking. I have gotten constant phone calls, as the borough office has, about complaints about the visitor parking being revoked. Now, with that in mind, many of the conversations that I have, and believe me, myself and the officers, including Robin, we try to be as professional, as patient as we possibly can during all these conversations. I often find 8 times out of 10 during those conversations that the people that are inquiring about these passes have private driveways. And it just seems to be a non-starter argument okay, well, please, by all means, use your private driveway. You know, if you have visitors, if you have people that are coming there to take care of your children, babysitters, have them use your private driveway. We've offered extensively the options and alternatives in the newsletters about using our municipal lots, making sure that people realize that there is non-regulated parking throughout the entire borough. In addition to that, also letting them know that if you do in fact have a housekeeper that's coming there once a week on Friday and they're only there for 2 hours, they can park in a 2-hour zone. But they just have to be aware of their time. But I can tell you that Robin does not go out there and hammer. She's not waiting behind a 2-hour zone at 2 hours and 1 minute and writing a ticket. It does not work that way. She'll chalk it and she'll mark it. And correct me if I'm wrong, Robin, you're probably looking at 2.5 to 3 hours before she tickets. So there's a whole lot of moving parts to consider.
Yes.
Now we are no different than any other community or any other village or borough or township within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. A lot of issues with parking involve a lot of communities. We're no different. I just think a lot of times when we do, and we might as well talk about the elephant in the room, when we do get people that call us about this issue, they simply want to get me to help them to stop to have to pay the ticket. They don't want to pay the ticket.
With that in mind, though, I do want to be sensitive and cognizant that there are streets in the borough that don't have driveways.
Yes.
And it is an issue. It can be. I know for a lot it shouldn't be an issue because they have a solution. But there are situations where you need someone fairly close to the house because of medical reasons or an aging parent or health. Whatever it is, and there are, there's a percentage of houses in the borough that don't have driveways.
Sure. So go.
I guess I just have a first question. I don't even understand who made the decision to suddenly enforce these 2-hour zones. And is this a public safety? Was this a mayor or a chief directive?
Can I answer that?
No, I'm sorry. Hold on one second. If we could just, so 2-hour zones, they were never not enforced. They were always in enforcement.
Always.
2-hour zones were always being enforced. We were just not adding additional 2-hour zones.
Okay, then I'll speak of my experience. In 15 years of living on Iona in a 2-hour zone, it was never enforced. Nor did we even really know.
I can pull up the stats.
Okay, I didn't know. I didn't know that. Okay, so my question is.
So that's completely untrue.
So
Maybe you didn't get one.
right. So like I've had my parents visit for half a day for 15 years in a 2-hour zone, and they've never gotten a ticket. So my question is, we are on the heels of a comprehensive policy revision, right? The parking study, last meeting said this is a priority. Why are we even talking about 2-hour zones when we are hopefully reevaluating the entire borough?
All right, can I explain the 2-hour zones though?
Well, no, I think I want the larger holistic question on the timing from council. If we are reviewing comprehensively, do the zones make sense? Because the parking study data says they don't.
2-hour zones, you mean?
Well, not as they exist now, to your reference.
That's right. As they exist now.
Right. So why are we enforcing these and taking away the visitor kind of day pass, particularly now knowing that there's only 10, given that we're on the heels of this holistic?
So this came to my attention with implementation of some new parking equipment. A new system.
The new ticketing system as well as the new...
and that's when I was first made aware that that we could no longer use the visitor list. And I wasn't aware prior to getting the system that this would have been an issue. So.
So was I.
So it's a software, it's a result of this new software.
Right, and
We went
so
from
we
one
have to
system
have
to
a
the next.
registration piece so that if you want a guest pass, that they would come in and register that vehicle. That's the piece that was missing. Robin was traveling around with a list in her pocket.
No,
Which was
she
sort
was
of-
not.
Oh, well, that's what I've been told for 18 years.
No, she was not.
You were not.
Years ago, I did.
Years ago.
When we went to the T2 system.
Oh, yes, right,
It
I
went
know.
into the system.
Thank
If
you.
a car was on the list,
Yes.
it popped up.
Thank you.
Ticket was not
Prior to
written.
T2, I
New
apologize.
system back in March,
Right.
nothing comes up. I
Nothing
don't
comes up.
know visitor
Right.
from
Right.
healthcare worker from
That's right.
people parked. I
From somebody
know
for an
nothing.
abandoned, right, you don't know.
I
until
just
you're-
don't
until you're
know.
there.
So then my part two, to my comment is, you know, there are many inconveniences in our borough right now. The bridge is out,
Yeah.
we have construction, we have paving going. Given the fact that we are again on the heels of a comprehensive parking revision, this is one that we can control. Is there any immediate public safety need? Because we have been getting enormous complaints of people that are getting ticketed for this 2-hour zone. I'm trying to understand why this isn't imperative right now.
Matt, could you tell us how many, is there a spike in 2-hour zone ticketing? He's gonna take a look,
There's been a spike in ticketing in general.
in
I
general.
don't have
Well,
a
spring is in the
breakdown.
air. But,
I don't have a breakdown. of
okay, all right.
2 hours.
So we're not sure that there's been a spike in ticketing, but I think what we have to do is move towards a resolution for this piece, for the public's best interest, right? So if you, and I think this is where I want to turn to Sean and say, do you have some amount of, okay,
I'm not gonna sit here and get bashed for up tickets and everything else. That's just.
I'll talk to you later.
All right,
Thank you.
Nice.
I just want to clarify, this isn't a bashing at all, this is just trying to understand what the policy directive and the
But you won't even let me
plan is.
explain. So you want to hear from the council, so hear from the council and I'll just go to work.
Well, no, I want to clarify that. I wanted to hear our comprehensive approach, given the fact that we just voted that the parking was our priority. So I'm not, you know, Robin's directive is down the line to how are we, as a council, going to address the priority that we just voted on?
and I understand that, and obviously we all need to have that conversation as a larger piece, but we've been asked to address this immediately on behalf of the public who needs those parking passes. And that is a directive from Council President to move forward and have this piece as best solidified as we can to bring back to the next meeting and therefore move to legislation, if it's possible, if we so choose. So, Mr. Metrick, would you give us your information?
Well, there'd be two things that would have to happen, and I'm picturing a sequence of implementation that would stretch out into January 1 of 2020.
Okay.
Because some of the implementation is going to take some background work that Matt and I haven't done yet. Because in the parking study is a new geography of parking zones. We would have to properly sign the entire borough. There's a cost and time commitment to be able to do that. There is also a conversation I need to have with John, Matt, and Robin about the technique. Is there a physical, currently we use stickers. Do we continue to use a sticker, a hang tag, a creative tattoo? Do we just do license plate numbers? And we need to have that conversation offline to vet the pros and cons of all those approaches, because we have all those approaches available to us. What Matt and I can easily, air quotes, do is, because we've already talked about it a lot, is propose a pricing structure.
That's right. Thank you.
I don't think the pricing structure indicated on page 26 of the parking study is too elaborate. And in fact, what my general impression over the recommendations of the parking study is they got a little too elaborate, a little too fancy with stuff.
Creative.
And we're just gonna take their more baseline proposals, the big picture ideas. So we do think that there should be an escalating fee for the number of cars that you want to park on borough streets, because you're creating more of an impact. You should pay for that impact. What that number should be, whether the first car is free or not, I think we can put together some proposals that give us a revenue projection, that give us some sort of idea of a nexus, a connection between what we spend administratively on the PD side and the
right.
borough side to
That's a good point. That's
manage
the earlier
parking
point.
systems,
Right.
and then what sources of revenue is the parking system generating. And I will say that the permitting is not a big income generator. We don't want the permit to be a big income generator, but we do want the permit to have some pricing feedback into the parking market.
Right.
We do want there to be a disincentive for persons to have 4 vehicles on the street, 5 vehicles on the street. In fact, I think Matt and I will talk about it, but I think there should be a cap on residential permitting, and there should be an escalating price structure.
Absolutely.
But we want it to be easy to administer, so we want it to be either A or B. Not A, B, or maybe C if you satisfy conditions D, E, and F, and G if you are conditions H and A and I. That's going to drive us nuts and be impossible to enforce, which is why I don't think it's practical for us to consider the variable of whether or not a household has a driveway as being one of the conditions in that algorithm, because we tested it out, we looked at it, we thought through, to use Matt's phrase, we hamster wheeled some possibilities of doing that, and we're like, that's going to be an investment of this many hours, and then we're going to get what's the appeals process? How do we adjudicate? Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Shared driveways.
Yeah.
The shared
Right.
driveway
Yeah,
that somebody built a fence
right.
down that I can really only fit one car in. All that stuff we'd rather just not deal with. We'd rather have it be simple.
Sure.
We think that commercial properties that border on 2-hour zones should be able to get permits. We think it should be capped. But we don't want the situation we have now where we have some commercial businesses who can't get any permits because their property is not wide enough.
Right. It's determined by curb feet currently, and it's just not appropriate.
So it should be capped at some rate. And I think we have a lot of, we can have, I think there's a lot of wisdom in the map on page 28.
Yep.
And the idea that a permit is not exclusive to the block you live on. In
Right.
fact, the permit
Yes.
is, we were playing around yesterday, there's zone 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
So I think in primary colors, blue, red, and yellow. If you're a yellow zone residential parking permit, you can park anywhere in the yellow zone. And not all the streets in the yellow zone need to be 2-hour regulated. Some of them can be unregulated. As a matter of fact, I think if we propose a pricing structure that indicates the true cost of on-street parking, you're going to find persons and residents who might not want to have a 2-hour zone anymore on their street.
Right.
And we should be cognizant of that process and be able to deal with those petitions, just like in the parking study it talks about petitions to create new permit streets. We have a much more complex issue to consider when we talk about street redesign process and issue. I'd like us to use Windsor Avenue to help us learn what that looks like before we start launching into that. So I think the street redesign process, that's the evaluation of whether a street's circulation pattern should change, whether its parking should change, whether we go out and stripe the portions of the roadway that are in front of persons' driveways just to indicate where you're not supposed to park. All of that decision-making process, I think we need to learn how we do it, learn how to do it right, and not really launch into that. We should cool our jets on that redesign process just for a little bit until we learn how it's going to play out on Windsor Avenue and we build some skill set to deal with that issue. So to get back specifically to visitor passes, we need to decide on the annual fee for parking, and then the visitor pass I suggest is a monthly prorated version of that fee. If you were going to charge $60 a year for an annual pass, I think the monthly rate should be some fraction of that. It could be $15, it could be $30, and it should be for 30 days. It should be an easy calendar month process. But again, we have to talk with John about the technique so that Robin can do her job effectively. I don't want to
Right.
create another basically virtual back pocket list for her to work with. That was a nightmare, and
Yeah.
that's impossible for her to do her job under those circumstances. So I want it to be effective for her. And am I missing something here?
So I'm just trying to understand. Sean, are you saying that we're looking at 7-8 months till we can figure this out with the you said till next year, you're looking, no, okay.
No,
No.
no.
Oh, okay.
No.
'cause that's-
No.
January 1 date.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
What's that
What
date?
is that date?
I think the parking study implementation is going to roll out in waves.
Okay,
And some of the early waves are going to be easy things to do,
okay.
like a visitor pass.
Okay, okay.
So it's putting the infrastructure into the larger thing that holds up all of parking, right? So it's these small increments that go up that hold the larger.
Okay.
Creating this.
That's how I see it.
Yeah,
Creating this zoned map and implementing it out on the street and
Yeah.
getting everybody in the borough who currently has a permit, which I'm gonna hazard a guess is around 600 or 700 permits.
okay,
To get a new permit,
Yeah.
which we used to do every year.
yes.
And I remember what January and March and February were like in
Crazy
the
months.
office. You didn't do anything else.
Okay,
Because you were getting up out of your desk, walking to the counter.
I got you.
Helping with the transaction. Which is why we started doing free permits if you send them in by email.
Yeah.
Right.
We like our residents, but we don't need to see you to buy a permit.
Gotcha. All right, so it's a roller.
Okay.
So we'll have to figure out, pardon me, I think maybe a deliverable for us the next time we meet is some analysis on a pricing structure and a technique to solve the now issue.
I have actually a suggestion.
Yeah.
Please.
A little history. I heard, was through the parking system, or the parking study, heard the priority of council that the parking study needs to be a priority. The functional part of that, the former parking system, T2, it was dysfunctional. We couldn't use that to apply the recommendations of the parking study.
That's right.
So just to lay out the framework of the methodology. So this new system was selected because, first of all, they're a local company and they know Pennsylvania, and it connects directly. It fixes all of the technical problems that we had with the former system. Second question is, or the second answer is that, second point is that this system can be everything we want it to be.
Okay.
Third thing is that through that process of setting it up and starting to digest the parking recommendations, I was always drawn to the simplified parking regulations section, right? It's way too complicated, and it doesn't need to be this complicated. And so this system was a refinement of that. It is all fixed. We have reduced all of the outliers that puts the borough in a position of liability. So we've reduced that, with the idea that we wanted to hear how many issues are coming up. Say all of that to say, in the meantime, I believe there is a simple solution.
Okay.
And that simple solution is discretion. If we can develop some sort of paper, an application, an appeal process of a ticket. If that person can put their name on that piece of paper, I am a resident of this block, I have a parking permit, this is my issue. Discretion. Isn't that the Norbert idea? Look, come to John. How many visitors do we have?
Oh, it's 10 a month, right? It's just request for 10 a month, right?
You are the enforcement side, and then you can disseminate that out to Rob and look, this car, keep an eye out for it, right? In the meantime, low cost, low effort solution to alleviate this issue. I think that would work.
So here's my question. Let's say I call the office, I say I have a long-term care provider coming in, and this is their tag, and this is their information. The system we have currently, is it set up to take that information and to keep the information about the vehicle that's going to be in the borough? And is that information then shared with Robin?
The answer is it has the potential to do that so long as it's issued as a permit. So we have no structure for permitting. The system has residential permits, it has visitor permits. So that would fall under a visitor permit.
So would, every time Robin sees a car that's in violation, would she have to, how would she know without going back to some list?
It would be as a result of, right now, it's a result of issuing a ticket and then the person
No,
contacting the office.
right.
When when the permitting program is set up, visitor, it's all done through the system, license plate, make, model, address. It populates instantaneously. Robin would enter the license plate number, it pops up,
Right.
visitor pass this day.
And what's preventing us from taking this piece into the system now?
Council's legislation.
Legislation.
Yeah, that was
So there you are.
the third piece.
So that's that. So that's why we're here. That's our job, and that's ultimately what Council President and the Mayor would like us to get to. Cindy had a question.
I'm sorry, I just
Sure,
tried to
go
work. So I guess back to this idea of multiple cars, if you're using a driveway, and a luxury tax, or whatever.
Whatever you want to call it, right.
I am absolutely for that, and a resident made two comments that really stuck with me. One, when we put in the snow emergencies, and it's one-side parking, the town survives.
Yeah.
Because people use their driveways.
Yes, of course.
And additionally, someone reframed this idea of, it's not street parking, it's car storage.
Yeah.
And that really changed my thinking. So if you decide you have 4 cars and you have a driveway and you'd like to store 3 of those cars on our public street,
That's right.
then paying for that car
Storage has a
seems
substantial fee.
appropriate. And as legislators, I feel as if we have the responsibility to say, well, you don't get free car storage, that we are going to legislate that. So those are just my 2 final comments, and I apologize, I have to run to
Nope,
work.
I appreciate your comments. Rob, do you have anything to add?
Well, so I'm just wondering, what is the ordinance that we need to work on?
So we're,
as council?
right, so in a quick conversation I had with John, it looks like, and even though he tried to dissuade me from maybe John Walco, my apologies, John Walco, our solicitor, having that conversation where we might have to write it once and refine it after that as we move forward into the other pieces. So if what we're looking for is the legislation for guest or visitor pass, yes, he's aware that this is something that we need to take a hold of sooner rather than later. I was unable to get him yesterday, and so for this meeting, and I apologize about that. And he has had, I think, or will have conversations with the office regarding the specific pieces and what the system, what we're looking for from the technology side. I don't have an answer for when, sooner rather than later. We're going to try to do the best we can to get all the information out there. But as you know, council is required to meet in the public, therefore in 30 days advertisement, or however many days now, advertisement of legislation so that the public is aware of it. So we do have those constraints to think about. I'm going to get an answer today, and I'll put it back out there as soon as I can, so I apologize for those of you playing along at home. I don't have that specific answer today. Sorry.
And just one little point, most of the 2-hour zones are not effective on, I think the signs say not effective on Saturdays and Sundays.
That's right.
I think they say except Saturdays and Sundays.
Sundays,
So if your sign on your street says, except Saturdays and Sundays, it's not in effect on the weekends.
It's
right.
also not in effect outside of that defined 2-hour time.
That's
Usually
fine.
it expires at 6 p.m.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
From 6 to 8 in the morning.
So just as a little source of relief.
Yes, right.
Yes.
Okay. So I think to Matt's point was talking about some amount of relief of these 10 requests we get per month, some sort of coordination or an application that says, these are folks who are visiting and we have them to maybe be able to speak to John regarding.
Just to de-escalate a little bit.
De-escalate so that people aren't angry. And we're sorry that it's in this order, but this, sausage in government, it just doesn't, it's ugly. John, how do you, opinions, thoughts, or ideas on that?
Just to actually kind of dovetail off the conversation with Matt. Matt and I have talked about this extensively quite a few times.
Right.
So one thing to take into consideration, as Matt has said repeatedly during our conversations, is that our new system can pretty much design to do anything we needed to do. Hang tags can become irrelevant, stickers can become irrelevant. So in other words, if you have a visitor process where, that type of process where it's going to be a temporary basis, that would certainly alleviate a lot of stress and concern for the borough residents. And I fully support that. I think overall, if we look at this as one of the biggest takeaway pieces, the chunks, the low-hanging fruit that we can take care of, I think you're going to hear a lot of things tamped down about our new parking management process, period. Which and then would give us the ability and the time to move forward with the other pieces of the study that we have to implement. But the one thing to take into consideration with that system, with the handheld devices, and also know for it's public information, we do have 2 handheld devices, one assigned to police officers and one assigned to parking controller. Now, the good news is that both do enforcement as needed, the parking controller more so. But if for instance, if they call in and somebody says, my daughter or my son are going to be here for the weekend and they're coming in from college and I do not have a driveway, whatever ramifications or parameters we set, they call into the borough office Monday through Friday and they say, here's my information, here's my tag. The information gets entered into the system over at the borough office. As Robin goes out there to try to either with the license plate reader, the handheld device, or just tapping the tag in, it'll alert her somehow on the device to let her know that this has been on the visitor permit pass. So to me, I think that this is certainly something that can be done.
Yeah.
And we can somehow streamline it. That's the way that I would prefer the process to be. But again, I think we need legislation and support
So we need
in black and white from the council to do that.
Okay.
But I think overall, if we do take away this piece, you're going to hear a lot of good resolution for the community.
Great.
Yeah.
And not only cost, to your point, types of visitor passes, day passes, week passes, or we can cap it, right? I mean, it's just like, we can really fine tune this, and we can, the system can have multiple types of visitor passes. So get your head around that, what is the value to a day pass? What's the value to 2 days of passes? What's the value of a week? You want to keep it at a week, cap it at a week.
And also, too, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, just for everybody's own edification, that would actually be baked into the pie, and as soon as that would expire within the system, you would go to hit that tag, it would allow you to issue a ticket because that time period has since expired. So, and then obviously you would have to think about cost. We would have to identify cost for whatever specification in terms of permit that you would want.
Sure. And if you put a cost on it too, persons might not find a different solution.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Just walk away from it. Because now, since it's had no cost assigned to it.
No cost and no validation.
Right.
There was no validation from a resident calling in, who knows if they were a resident.
Right.
We have no way.
We have no way
We
to
had
know.
no way, no mechanism to verify that person was actually a resident along that 2-hour zone. Call in, hey, I have a visitor to name insert block here. Oh, great. Done. It's lacking that validation piece of it.
Right. And other pieces come along with that, with the validation. So we're in between these 2 pieces, right? The larger piece is to finding out the cost and having legislation, but from now until we get that piece done, your idea of having some kind of communication back to the police department regarding these tickets.
I mean,
what I'm saying is, can the mayor and you and the chief work that out? And
we're the enforcement arm of it.
Right.
So, I mean, as we start to have these conversations, we have to keep that in mind because, the idea of the idea of everybody coming to John, John's,
No. I don't. No. What I'm suggesting is just
then this stuff will never get done.
Yes, a process. What I didn't mean to call you directly. What I meant was the process that Matt had. I apologize.
And believe me, right now people are calling me.
And they're calling me too. So, and they're at my door, and I get it.
Apparently, I have been the focus on Facebook, which is fine. It comes with the territory, But
welcome to the jungle, John.
But that's okay. I can be the whipping post for a while.
That's okay. So work on this sort of short-term process that we can get done and then release back out to the public and have that conversation, maybe at an infrastructure meeting if we can get it done by then. Have some kind of a form out there of people, the 10 people on average who need these passes. We can get that done sooner rather than later. We'll move the legislation and the fee structure piece over and talk to Mr. Walco regarding legislation and getting it on the table sooner rather than later. Okay? Anybody object?
May I just clarify what I thought I heard?
Yeah.
Which was Matt suggesting some post-ticket issuance process of validation affidavit, whereas you were suggesting you'd rather not do it that way. You'd rather it be front-loaded with the right legislation on the front end so that the enforcement officer's duty hasn't changed.
Right.
Whether it's Robin or an officer, they're issuing the ticket, and the ticket's going to be valid. We're not going to go through Did I understand that interaction correctly?
So look, the idea here is that for us to
It's not clear to me
develop,
what we're
to
doing.
develop a visitor permitting, to develop a visitor permitting process, I want that process to be deliberate. We suffer from issues when we try to do things quickly. It'll just be, it'll create way too much work. I want to be deliberate, I want to develop legislation that is really sound. All right, so in the meantime, as a stopgap measure, if we develop some sort of documentation, appeal process, put something on paper, have someone who got a ticket, who they believe that they did not get it correct, enter visitor list here, put the information down, including the ticket number, put it on paper so we know, what is it? And then have that as is that valid? If yes, dismiss the ticket. If no, no. It goes to the
So it's a
court.
paper review process.
Yes, and it's a stopgap measure.
Right.
Right,
And that's
this-
what we're looking for between now and the legislative piece.
I am not confident that we will be able to develop a visitor permit legislation in a month. I just don't,
I've done it sooner, my friend. The reality is,
I'm not comfortable.
I understand that, but this is not about our comfort. And I'm sorry to say that. You and I are on the hot seat, and so it's got to get done. The public has an expectation that these pieces are going to be handled at this table in this room with the smart people we have here. And my charge has been to get this done sooner rather than later, and that's what I plan on doing. And I'm sorry for everybody. I'm sorry, because it's going to impact all of us. It's impacting them. And we have to do something. We have to take action. I had something about next month's meeting, and now I can't remember what it was. It went away. John, I think the piece that we want to talk about for next month is evening and weekend enforcement of parking violations overall. Currently not so enforced on evenings and weekends, but we should get back to that piece. Obviously, this is part of the conversation. I'm not saying we have to, we're not looking for hard and fast, but certainly to have the conversation as we move forward with the larger pieces about parking. Because Robin is one person, and that, if you'll allow me, just indulge me 1 second. She's one person and has dealt with 3 systems in her time, at least 3, in the time that she has been employed here. And she's one person. And her task is huge, and it's not easy. And we make it challenging from our side. We're not, we haven't always been, in my time here, sensitive to what's going on the street. We need to do that. And we need to have her protected and have as much information as possible to do the job we're asking her to do. And that's our responsibility here at the table and council as a whole. She does her job well. She does it honestly. She has never, anything we've asked her to do, she's never said, no, I'm not going to do that. She's always been willing to work with us, even in the times where we've been very confused about what direction we're going in. So I just want to give Robin that credit, and she's been with us a long time, and she does her job very well. So that being said, I thank her for her service to the community. Anybody have anything else? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you so much.